The Human Prisoner in Royal Chains. Jackson Reed opened his eyes slowly and saw a golden ceiling above him. He felt soft silk under his back and smelled strange flowers in the air. This was not the battlefield where he had fallen. His body ached, his wrists felt heavy, and when he looked down, he saw glowing silver chains wrapped around them. His heart raced as he tried to sit up, but the chains tightened, pulling him back onto the bed. The walls of the room curved upward like a shell. Everything shimmered with light, but there was no warmth. The silence was thick, only broken by the sound of soft footsteps growing closer. Jackson turned his head just in time to see the doors open and a tall alien woman enter. Her skin was lavender. Her eyes, silver like mirrors. Her dress floated behind her like smoke, and a golden crown rested on her head. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he had ever seen. She stopped at the foot of his bed and looked at him not with hate, not with pity, but with something else, something colder. "You're awake," she said. Finally, her voice was soft but sharp like a blade. "Where am I?" Jackson asked, his voice dry. "You're in my palace," the woman replied, "and you're my prisoner." Her lips curled just slightly, not with cruelty, but with ownership. Jackson frowned. "Why me?" "Because you're human," she said. "And we need something from you. Something only." You can give. Her eyes flashed. And for the first time, Jackson saw pain hiding under her perfect face. He tried to pull his hands free again, but the chains didn't move. "What do you want from me?" he asked slowly. She stepped closer. The guards by the door did not move. They watched without blinking. "I am Queen Zelia," she said, "of the highborn line of Zerelin. My people are at war. My bloodline is fading. If I do not produce a strong heir, I will lose my throne, and my people will fall into chaos." Jackson's breath caught. "What does that have to do with me?" The Queen's silver eyes locked with his. "Because the scientists have told me your DNA is strong. Your kind are violent, fast adaptive. You survive anything. I need an heir, and you are going to give me one." He stared at her as if she had slapped him. This was insane. He wasn't a tool. He wasn't breeding stock. He was a soldier, not some alien queen's answer to a political problem. "And if I say no," he asked, his voice low. Zelia didn't blink. "Then you'll stay here in chains until you change your mind. The law allows me to keep you as long as needed. You are war property. You crossed into our sky. You are mine now." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Jackson felt the rage build inside him, but he also felt something else. Fear. This woman wasn't lying. She wasn't joking. This was real. He was alone on an alien world, a prisoner in a floating palace. And this queen saw him as nothing more than a solution. Zelia turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You will be treated with comfort. You will eat well. You will be kept alive. But remember this, freedom will only come after you fulfill your duty. Then and only then will we talk about sending you home." The doors closed behind her, and the guards followed her out. Jackson was left alone. The chains hummed softly around his wrists. He stared at the ceiling again, trying to breathe, trying to think. There had to be a way out. He wouldn't let himself become part of her twisted plan. He was human, and humans always find a way to fight back. He closed his eyes and began planning his next move, because no matter how beautiful the queen was, no matter how kind her voice sounded, he knew one thing. She was not his savior. She was his captor, and he was not going to be her pet, her tool, or her breeder. Not without a fight, and not without a plan. The palace might be floating in the clouds, but Jackson Reed had climbed harder walls than this. He would play her game for now, but one day soon she would see what it meant to chain a human and think they would obey. Her people hate him, but she still brings him food. The first time Jackson left his chamber, the stairs hit him like daggers. Virelians lined the crystal hallways. Servants, guards, nobles, all watching him with disgust. Their eyes were sharp, lips twisted in silent insults. Whispers followed him like shadows. Beast, animal, breeder. He didn't understand the words, but their meaning was clear. He was not welcome here. 2 guards with electric staffs walked behind him, pushing him forward gently but firmly. He was being taken to the inner garden. Daily sunlight protocol, they said with blank faces. The garden was nothing like Earth. The trees were tall and blue, their leaves humming softly. The sky above was artificial, but the light was warm. And waiting at the center was her. Queen Zelia sat on a floating bench carved from starstone. She wore a deep red gown today, and her hair was braided with glowing gems. She didn't smile when he arrived. She only pointed to the stone bench across from her. Jackson sat in silence, muscles tense. The guards stood far but watched every move. She placed a tray between them. Food, steamed vegetables, some glowing fruits, a meat that looked like roasted bird, all prepared carefully. She gestured for him to eat. "I'm not hungry," Jackson said. She didn't respond, just leaned forward and began eating herself. For minutes, only the sound of utensils filled the air. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. "They hate you, my people. They think I've shamed my bloodline by bringing you here." Jackson stared at her. "You don't say." Zelia's jaw tightened. "But they don't know the whole truth. They don't know what I see when I look at you." "And what's that?" She finally met his eyes. "A survivor, strong enough to resist even me." Jackson laughed coldly. "Is that a compliment or another insult?" "Neither," she said. "It's a test." He leaned back. "So this whole thing, me being chained and paraded like a trophy, it's all some royal experiment? I didn't choose this path," she said quietly. "But I will walk it to the end, and I will not let my kingdom fall into civil war because of fear and weakness. I need an heir. But not just any heir. One born from strength and will." Jackson shook his head. "You think mixing human blood with yours will solve everything?" Zelia looked away. "The ancestors used to call it blood tempering, a way to bring balance. You may call it desperation." He pushed the tray slightly away. "What if I still say no?" She sighed. "Then you stay in that room. Forever. They won't let me release you until you comply. My council will replace me with someone else, someone crueler. And you'll be disposed of. Quietly." Silence returned between them. The glowing leaves swayed in the soft breeze. Birds with silver feathers chirped in the trees. It looked peaceful. But it wasn't peace. It was a cage with flowers. Then Jackson asked a question that surprised even himself. "Why do you bring the food yourself?" Zelia blinked slowly. "Because if I send anyone else, you won't eat it." He didn't reply. He just looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't just a queen. She was trapped too. Pressured. Cornered. Just like him. Different prisons. Same bars. Later that night, he returned to his chamber. His wrists were no longer chained, but his door locked from outside. He paced the floor again and again, trying to understand what she really wanted from him. Not just a child. Not just a treaty through blood. There was something deeper. He opened the window. The night sky was a swirl of stars and 2 moons. Below, glowing cities hovered in the clouds. Escape. Impossible. But maybe he could do something else. The next morning, she returned with breakfast. This time, he didn't hesitate. He picked up the fork and took a bite. Zelia gave a small nod. "Better." Jackson wiped his mouth. "Don't get used to it. A slight smile touched her lips. You said that yesterday, and yet here we are. That smile didn't look royal. It looked real. And for the first time, Jackson realized something dangerous. He was starting to see her not as a captor, but as a woman. One he couldn't understand yet. One he might not be able to hate for long. But something inside warned him if he wasn't careful. He wouldn't just lose his freedom. He might lose his heart too. The Queen's secret revealed. Jackson followed in silence as the guards led him through a long glass corridor. Outside, the clouds shifted slowly beneath the floating palace, glowing orange under the twin suns. He had no chains now, but freedom still felt like a distant dream. He had started walking beside Queen Zelia each morning through the gardens, eating the strange food she offered, talking in careful words. But today was different. She hadn't spoken at all. Her face was still and cold, the way it had been when they first met. She stopped in front of a tall silver door with no handles. The guard stepped back. The door opened silently with a shimmer of light. Inside, Zelia said, her voice low. Jackson looked at her, trying to read her face. What is this place? She didn't answer. He stepped in. The room inside was colder than the rest of the palace. The walls were black stone, the ceiling covered in blue lights that blinked like stars. But it wasn't the walls or the lights. That made his breath stop. It was the glass tubes. Dozens of them lined the room, each one tall enough to hold a person. Some were filled with green liquid. Some were cracked. And inside a few were bodies. Alien bodies. Some looked almost human. Others had strange features, scales, fur, glowing skin. All were still. Some had their eyes open. Dead. Failed. Jackson froze. This, he whispered, this is a lab. Yes, Zelia said from behind him. The Royal Genetics Chamber. This is where they tried before you came. He turned to her slowly. Tried what? She walked past him, stopping beside one of the broken tubes. Inside lay a young male hybrid with claws and silver eyes. A scar ran across his chest. His face was twisted in pain, even in death. They called them the prototypes, she said quietly. Born from forced unions, bred in hope. Most died within days, others went mad. Jackson took a step back. You were going to do that to me? Zelia shook her head. No, I told them no. I refused to let them drug you, to harvest what they needed. That's why I visit you myself. That's why you're not strapped to a table like they wanted. He couldn't speak. I only have 1 moon left, she said. After that, the council will remove me. My bloodline ends. My people will turn to war. The empire will break into fire and ash, all because I couldn't give them an heir. Jackson looked at the silent bodies, the failed children, the broken dreams. You think a child between you and me will be any different? She turned to him, her eyes burning. Yes, because this time it won't be forced. It won't be made in a lab. It will be real. That's what the prophecy says. That only a true union can save us. A child born from willing hearts, not machines. Jackson laughed bitterly. Willing? You think I'm willing? She stepped closer. I think you are more than a prisoner now. You talk to me. You eat beside me. You look at me with eyes that are no longer full of hate. That is more than I ever hoped for. He looked down, unsure of what to say. You saved me from becoming like them, she whispered, pointing to the tubes. I still have a choice, but I need you to choose too. Jackson stared at her. She wasn't a monster. She was broken, cornered, trapped in her own crown, and he was starting to understand her pain. But pain wasn't enough. I'm still not your answer, he said quietly. Even if I wanted to help, I don't know what this place would do to me. She gave a slow nod. Then come with me tomorrow. I want to show you something else. Something I've never shared with anyone. If after that you still refuse, I won't ask again. Jackson looked around the room one last time. The cold tubes, the dead faces, the quiet hum of failed futures. He nodded once. As they walked out together, neither of them spoke, but both knew something had changed. The walls between them were cracking, and what waited behind them might change everything. The first night, and the explosion. Jackson stood at the edge of a floating balcony, high above the clouds, the wind brushing softly against his face. Virelia's twin moons hung in the night sky, casting a silver glow over the palace. Below, thousands of lights blinked in alien cities hovering quietly among the clouds. It looked peaceful, but Jackson knew better now. He had seen what lay behind the golden crystal. Labs full of broken bodies, a queen bound by chains no one could see. Behind him, the glass door slid open. Queen Zelia stepped onto the balcony, wrapped in a deep blue cloak embroidered with golden vines. For once, she looked less like a ruler and more like a woman. No crown, no guards, just her and him under the stars. You didn't run, she said softly. I had nowhere to go, Jackson replied, not turning around. And maybe I wanted to hear what else you had to show me. She stepped beside him. Then tonight, no council, no duties, no chains. Just speak with me. Jackson finally looked at her. That easy, huh? She gave a sad smile. Nothing has been easy. Not for either of us. They sat on the wide stone bench, watching the clouds move below like slow rivers. A small, glowing pot between them released soft warmth and the scent of something sweet. Alien flowers, maybe. Neither spoke for a long time. I used to come here as a child, Zelia finally said. Before all this, before the crown, I would dream of leaving, of living among the stars. What stopped you? Jackson asked. She looked down. Duty, bloodlines, expectations. They told me a queen must sacrifice her dreams for her people. Jackson picked up a small round fruit from the tray she'd brought. And now you're sacrificing yourself to save your throne. No, she said. I'm trying to survive. There's a difference. For a brief moment, she looked at him. Not as a queen commanding, but as a woman hoping. Something raw flickered in her eyes. Fear, loneliness, desire for something real in a world full of masks. You still believe this child will fix everything? Jackson asked. She nodded. Not the child alone, but what the child represents. A bridge. Proof that we can unite instead of destroy each other. He sighed. And what if I say yes, and things still fall apart? Then at least I tried, with honor. The silence returned, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was gentle. Jackson leaned back, hands behind his head. You know, back on Earth, I worked on machines, fixing engines. Never thought I'd end up here, in chains, being asked to father a royal heir. Zelia smiled slightly. You fix things. Maybe that's why I chose you. The two moons hung higher now, casting soft shadows on her face. Jackson looked at her longer than he meant to. She was beautiful. But more than that, she was real. For the first time since he crash-landed, he felt something other than anger or fear. He felt seen. She reached out slowly and placed her hand over his. I won't force you, she whispered. But if we do this, it must be together. Not for duty, not for politics, just because we choose it. Jackson didn't pull away. But before he could answer, the ground beneath them shook violently. An explosion rocked the far side of the palace. A flash of orange and fire lit up the sky. Alarms began blaring. Sirens howled across the floating towers. Zelia jumped to her feet. "No, they've come." "Who?" Jackson asked, already running beside her. "The Bloodfangs, a rebel clan. They vowed to kill me before any human hybrid is born." Another blast shook the air. Crystals shattered from the ceiling inside. Guards rushed through the halls yelling orders. Screams echoed from deep within the palace. "We have to move!" Jackson grabbed Zelia's hand, pulling her into the corridor. "Where's the safest place?" She led him through a side door into a narrow hidden tunnel behind the walls. "This way, an old escape route. Only I know it still exists." Flames burst down the hall behind them. A group of masked rebels stormed in, weapons drawn. Jackson turned, picked up a fallen guard's blaster, and fired without thinking. 2 rebels went down instantly. Zelia looked at him, shocked. "Guess you picked the right species," he muttered. They ran, heartbeats loud, footsteps echoing in the narrow tunnel. Smoke filled the air. The palace groaned under pressure, systems shutting down one by one. They burst into a hidden chamber. An old storage room long abandoned. The ceiling flickered, but it held. Breathing hard, Zelia leaned against the wall. "They'll burn everything to stop me." Jackson placed the blaster down. "Then we don't let them. Tomorrow you take me somewhere safe. We make a new plan, and maybe," she looked at him, "maybe I'll stop pretending I'm not starting to care." Her eyes softened, but she said nothing. Outside, the palace burned. Inside, something else had just started to ignite. The escape through fire and blood. Smoke curled through the cracks in the chamber doors. The air stung Jackson's throat, and the walls trembled as more explosions rocked the palace. Queen Zelia clutched her side, her deep blue cloak torn and blackened. Sparks fell from the ceiling like fireflies as warning sirens screamed in alien tones. "We can't stay here," Jackson said, voice low but urgent. He picked up the blaster again, its weight now familiar in his hands. "How many secret tunnels does a floating palace have?" Zelia's breathing was sharp. "One more. But it leads outside, through the Skybridge Tower." Jackson frowned. "Skybridge? It connects the palace to the nearest hover docks. If we reach it, there might be escape pods." He nodded once. "Then we run." They burst through the chamber doors and into chaos. The once beautiful halls of glowing stone were filled with smoke and the red glare of flames. Fallen guards lay scattered. Rebels in dark armor marched through the corridors, firing at anything that moved. The ceiling cracked above, and crystal panels fell with a deafening crash. Jackson pulled Zelia behind a support pillar. "Stay low." A group of rebels advanced toward them, unaware. Jackson stood up, aimed fast, and took down 2. The others scattered, not expecting the human to fight like a soldier from Earth. Jackson had trained for ground war, not floating palaces. But instinct took over. Every motion was sharp, deliberate. He moved like someone who had nothing to lose. Zelia tried to follow, but her leg gave out. "I'm slowing you down," she gasped. Without a word, Jackson scooped her into his arms. Her silver eyes widened. "You don't have to carry me." He grinned faintly. "You're not as heavy as you act, Your Majesty." She didn't argue again. They moved like shadows, dodging patrols, weaving through shattered halls and flaming doorways. The palace once designed for elegance had become a war zone. Jackson felt the floor tilt. One of the lower engines must have failed. If they didn't get out soon, the whole place would fall. Finally, they reached the tower. It was tall, round, and made of polished black stone, now cracked and burning. The sky bridge itself stretched out into the clouds, thin and glowing, like a path made of starlight. But guards were already there, dozens, loyal to the enemy council. blocking the only exit. Jackson set Zelia down gently behind cover. "Wait, here." "Jackson." He didn't wait for her to finish. He charged. Blaster fire lit the bridge. Jackson ducked, rolled, and fired. He didn't think. He just moved. One rebel screamed as he went down. Another fell from a single, perfect shot to the chest. The others panicked. No one expected the human prisoner to fight like a ghost made of fury. The last guard raised a sword of pure plasma. Jackson dodged it by inches, grabbing the rebel's arm and slamming him into the railing. The sword fell and Jackson kicked it into the clouds below. Silence followed. He turned around. The bridge was clear. Zelia stared from behind cover, stunned. "How? I told you," he said between breaths. "You picked the right species." They crossed the sky bridge together, smoke curling behind them. The wind whipped at their faces, and below, the vast world of Virelia shimmered in moonlight. At the end of the bridge, they reached the emergency hangar. Empty, except for a single, half-functional escape pod. Jackson ran his hand along the controls. "It'll fly." Zelia climbed inside slowly, still holding her side. Before entering, Jackson paused. He looked back at the burning palace. "Your home is falling," he said quietly. Zelia nodded. "And my old life with it." He stepped inside, sealed the hatch, and powered up the pod. Alarms wailed one last time behind them. The docking bay began to collapse. With a loud roar, the pod launched into the sky, diving into the clouds like a comet fleeing the storm. Inside, it was quiet. Zelia sat close to him, her hair falling loose around her face. "You didn't have to stay with me. You could have run." "I thought about it," Jackson admitted. "But I couldn't leave you behind." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Because I've seen cages before. And you've been locked in yours far longer than I've been in mine." They drifted in silence through the dark sky. Below them, the palace burned and cracked. But ahead, the unknown waited. And for the first time since he landed on this alien world, Jackson didn't feel like a prisoner anymore. Hiding among the rebels. The escape pod landed deep in the jagged highlands of the Wild Zone. Far from the floating cities and royal patrols, lightning danced across the sky above jagged cliffs, and thick blue mist rolled through the cracked canyons below. Jackson helped Zelia out of the pod carefully, her arm draped over his shoulder. She hadn't spoken much since they fled the palace. Her face was pale, her energy low. The injury from the explosion had worsened during the escape. "We're not safe here," she whispered weakly. Jackson nodded. "Then where do we go?" Zelia took a slow breath and pointed toward the valley. "There's a group hidden in the ruins. Former royalists who abandoned the crown. They might still be loyal to me. Or at least to what I used to be." With no other option, they started walking through the rocky wilderness. The cliffs echoed with distant howls, and strange, glowing creatures blinked from behind crystal growths. It wasn't long before shadows emerged from the fog, figures with cloaks and weapons, surrounding them in total silence. One stepped forward, her face covered by a silver veil. When she saw Zelia, she stopped in shock. "My queen, is it truly you?" Zelia didn't stand tall or proud. She simply said, "No, I'm not your queen anymore. Just a woman running from fire." The rebels lowered their weapons. They led them into a hidden sanctuary beneath the old world ruins, an ancient bunker now repurposed with lights, warmth, and simple living. The people there had tired faces but kind eyes. They offered food, shelter, and something Jackson hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Inside the stone shelter, Zelia collapsed onto a padded surface, breathing heavily. A medic rushed in and treated her side with glowing gel. Jackson sat close, watching her carefully. Despite everything, the throne, the explosion, the fall, she hadn't once asked for pity. And somehow, that made him want to stay even more. Later, one of the rebel leaders came to speak. He was tall and wide-shouldered, his skin dark bronze with faint scars of battle. His name was Kyle. She said you were a human. Kyle said, studying Jackson with interest. I'm not just a story, Jackson replied. Kyle smirked. No, you're the one she chose. Jackson's brows furrowed. She didn't choose me. We were both trapped. Kale's eyes narrowed. That's not what it looks like to us. You carried her through fire. You fought rebels with your bare hands. And now you're here, risking your life in exile. I didn't have a choice. Kale stepped closer. Everyone has a choice, human. And you made yours. That night, the rebels gathered in the fire chamber, an ancient cavern lit by glowing roots. Zelia stood before them, not as a queen, but as a broken leader. She told them everything about the failed heirs, the council's betrayal, the child she was told to bear. I ran not because I feared death, she said, her voice steady despite the pain. I ran because I refused to be a machine. I refused to build peace through lies and force. I will not return to that throne unless I rise by choice, not chains. The rebels murmured among themselves. Some nodded. Others looked doubtful. Then, Jackson stepped forward. He didn't plan to speak, but something inside him pushed. I was a mechanic back on Earth. He began. I fixed ships. Small ones. Big ones. Didn't matter. Every engine had one thing in common. If even a single piece was cracked, the whole system failed. He looked around the room. Virelia is broken. The system's cracked. You all know it. She knows it. But maybe, just maybe, we can fix it. Not with weapons. Not with blood. But with a new start. He glanced at Zelia. Her eyes shimmered in the firelight. For once, she wasn't wearing any royal colors. Just a plain tunic and cloak. She looked more human than ever. Kyle stood slowly. If what you say is true, then we'll protect you. But know this. Word of your escape is already spreading. The council won't rest until you're captured. Or worse. Jackson nodded. Then let them come. That night, Jackson sat beside Zelia near the warmth of the root fire. The air was calm. The sky above filled with twin moons. She placed a hand over her stomach. I don't know if it's begun, she whispered. But I feel something. Jackson looked at her. Then we protect it, he said. No matter what comes next. She leaned against him, her voice barely a breath. For the first time, I don't feel alone. And as the stars blinked silently above them, neither did he. The Child and the Crown. The rebel camp stirred just before dawn. Cool mist blanketed the rocky valley while strange birds called out across the cliffs. Deep inside the sanctuary, Jackson awoke to find Zelia already standing near the fire pit, her hand resting lightly over her belly. Her face looked calm, but her eyes betrayed something more. A storm was coming. He walked to her side. You feel it too? She nodded slowly. They're coming. The council's ships. I felt the air shift. The stars moved too quickly last night. That always means war in Virelian belief. Jackson sighed. We knew they wouldn't stay quiet forever. Word had already reached the rebel scouts. The Royal Council had declared Zelia a traitor and Jackson a contaminant to the bloodline. Every ship, every loyalist fighter, every hired hunter was now descending toward the highlands. Their goal was simple: eliminate the queen before she could birth the heir and erase the human from Varelian memory. Delia turned to Jackson and spoke softly. If I die, the child dies with me. If you die, I won't survive the grief. This baby, this strange little mix of our blood, is the last hope for peace. It cannot end here. Jackson stared into her eyes. Then we end it on our terms. Kyle, the rebel leader, entered the chamber with urgency in his step. Scouts report 6 warships approaching. You have maybe 1 hour before they hit the cliffs. Not enough time to run, Jackson said. Which means we stand, Kale replied, gripping his blade. Jackson nodded. Then we'll need everyone. Ready. Within minutes, the camp came alive. Fighters donned stolen armor. Blasters were powered. Barricades were raised across the main canyon path. Jackson helped load plasma charges along the outer ridge, while Cal directed the defensive lines. And at the center of it all, Zelia stood with her cloak pulled tight, her expression calm like a storm before it strikes. She walked to the center of the sanctuary and raised her voice. My people come to destroy what they fear. But let them see me standing, not hiding. Let them know I do not carry this child in shame, but with pride. I carry the future, and I will not bow. The rebels cheered, not as soldiers, but as people fighting for something greater. The skies roared soon after. 6 massive ships broke through the clouds, shaped like daggers of black stone. Royal banners flared along their wings. Drop pods launched from beneath them, slamming into the cliffs with thunderous force. Armed warriors poured out in perfect formation. Gleaming armor, mechanical beasts, blasters drawn. The first shots lit the sky in fire. Jackson fought like something born of earth and fury. He dodged blasts, rolled across cover, and used every trick from 100 dirty battlefields. The rebels fought hard too, but they were outgunned. For every enemy they dropped, 2 more arrived. Then the enemy commander stepped forward, a towering figure in silver robes and bone armor. His voice boomed across the canyon. Queen Zelia, surrender the hybrid and the human. You have lost. Zelia stepped forward, standing atop the highest ledge with the wind whipping through her hair. I am no longer your queen, she shouted. But I am still your future. The commander raised his hand. Then we erase that future now. Blasters charged, then everything stopped. A deep hum filled the air. Lights across the battlefield flickered. And from behind the rebels, the ancient mountain itself began to glow. The sanctuary had once been a temple, built over Varelian starstone. As the battle reached its peak, the energy inside it awoke for the first time in centuries. The child, still unborn, was reacting to the power. The ground shook. The sky turned gold. Jackson looked at Zelia. Is that? She clutched her stomach. Yes, it's starting. A shockwave pulsed from the temple, knocking enemy forces off their feet. Weapons shorted. Mechs collapsed. The council's commander screamed as energy tore through his armor, revealing a terrified man beneath the robes. Kale yelled, "Push now!" The rebels surged forward. Enemy forces broke ranks, retreating toward their ships. Within minutes, the skies were filled with fleeing vessels, leaving behind only silence, smoke, and cracked earth. When it ended, Zelia collapsed. Jackson caught her, holding her close. Is it time? He asked. She smiled weakly. Almost. Later that night, under the stars and among the surviving rebels, Zelia gave birth in the same chamber where she once hid. No doctors, no machines, just warmth, whispers, and the steady hand of the human who never left her side. A child with soft silver skin and earth-colored eyes took its first breath. A child not of one world, but of 2. Jackson held the baby gently and looked into Zelia's tired but glowing face. "What now?" he asked. She smiled. "Now, we live." And as the rebels bowed, not to a queen but to a mother, they knew they had witnessed the start of a new era, not ruled by bloodlines, but by choice.